and welcome to the day 3 of the Rise and Revolution Conference, Moving in Solidarity, Building Movements. My name is Leila Tamale, and as a Tongan woman, it is my honor to offer a whakatapu-tapu, a traditional acknowledgement and expression of respect to ground this sacred space. Malo Alpito, or thank you very much to Pauline Fonua and my Ofakitonga family for providing me with a template for this whakatapu and fostering a safe space within which myself and others can reconnect with our Tongan language and culture. I am still a student of my Tongan language, so please forgive any errors. Whakamalo he whainga malie ko eni, keo whakahoko atu, a e whekao ko eni. Ko le keo hufanga he talamalu o e whanua o Ramaitush Aloni. Whakatapu ki he pule ako oku mea, President Jennifer Taylor Mendoza, mo Dr. Micaela Ochoa. Whakatulo atu ki he haapoto, mo e ako anga College of San Mateo. Oku o hongaia he taimi, kai ata mo oku a e whainga malie ko eni. Greetings. I ask to be excused and pay my respects to the customs and culture of this land, which is Ramaitush Aloni land. I ask to be excused and pay my respects to the administrators who are here, President Jennifer Taylor Mendoza and Vice President of Administrative Services, Micaela Ochoa. I ask to be excused and pay my respects to the educators and to this place of learning, the College of San Mateo. Thank you for your time and attention and for giving me the space and opportunity to speak now. I'd like to again call attention to the people whose land we are hosting this conference on and recognize that the College of San Mateo sits on the unceded territory of the Ramaitush Aloni, the original peoples and stewards of the San Francisco Peninsula. The ancestral land of the Ramaitush includes what is colonially known as San Francisco County, San Mateo County, and part of Santa Clara County. Due to Spanish and Mexican colonization and the US settler project propelled by Manifest Destiny and anti-indigeneity, the ancestors of the present-day Ramaitush people were forcibly removed from their lands. 75% of that population was lost as a result of these genocidal efforts, and the remaining were forced into poverty, resulting in one surviving lineage that comprises the 4 branches of the Ramaitush Aloni peoples today. Today, the Ramaitush Aloni do not have ownership over any of their ancestral lands. We recognize that every member of the College of San Mateo community has and continues to benefit from the occupation of this land since the institution's founding 100 years ago. Please join us in recognizing and honoring their ancestors, descendants, elders, and all other members of the Ramaitush Aloni community. One way you can do this is by supporting the nonprofit work of the Association of Ramaitush Aloni by paying Unikin land tax. I come to you today as co-lead organizer of this conference, as scholar intern for the Multicultural and Dream Center, as a student in the Mana learning community, and as an Indigenous woman who understands that the road ahead towards our liberated future is a long and arduous one, but one that we will journey through together nonetheless. We hope that the RISE conference can be a place of critical learning, growth, and accountability as we reflect on the interconnected systems of oppression, including white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, the incarceration system, capitalism, settler colonialism, climate injustice, and more that plague our societies, and how we can mobilize to dismantle these systems and achieve collective liberation. Thank you again for being here, and I'll pass it to my co-lead, Brittany.
Thank you so much, Leila. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Ariharan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Multicultural and Dream Centers, also known as the MCCDC's first annual Social Justice Conference. I am a scholar intern at the MCCDC, and I've been, which has provided me with the opportunity to co-lead this conference alongside Leila, and we cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to join us as we rise in revolution. The fact that you are here today is a testament to your commitment and willingness to learn about and be part of a movement that aims to transform our respective campuses and communities. So we urge you to relish in this empowering and radicalizing space and to use this as an opportunity to ask questions and grow and to realize the impact and value of your demands and actions. I also want to take this time to share a few housekeeping rules for our virtual conference. So firstly, please engage in the chat as this is a space where we would love to hear your thoughts and reactions. As for questions, please direct those all to the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will be monitoring this regularly. And of course, feel free to use our RISE conference Zoom background today and at any other Zoom meetings that you join throughout the week. And of course, please continue to register for sessions and continue inviting all your friends. We are so proud and excited to be able to bring to you an array of amazing speakers and leaders whose advocacy work serves as a model and inspiration for the themes and values of our conference. Scholars like Dr. Angela Davis, Dr. LaNada War Jack, Deshaun Harrison, and so many more have prepared for us presentations and workshops that will encourage us to engage in meaningful discussions and critically reflect on how we can effectively use our positions as students, staff, and faculty members to rethink practices and policies and how they can either positively contribute to or threaten social justice initiatives. We hope this inspires you to propel the shift from liberal demands to radical and revolutionary change. This conference is also an opportunity to celebrate the College of San Mateo's centennial legacy. As the college approaches 100 years of educating students, we not only gather here to celebrate the centennial legacy, but we also hope to recognize and hold accountable its roles in the systems and institutions that are inherently oppressive in their practices. When we think about the College of San Mateo's history, we cannot overlook the fact that the college is what it is today, largely due to the dedication and work of Black, Indigenous, and other students of color in the late 1960s and throughout its 100 years. We want to spotlight the work of those brave CSM students and faculty members, especially in relation to the College Readiness Program, also known as CRP, such as Robert Hoover, Jean Worth, and Aaron Manganiello, who risked suspension and being silenced, all in the name of community empowerment. The program's remarkable success, due to the relevant and transformative education it provided underrepresented students, threatened and troubled the campus administration because it took power out of their hands and placed it in the hands of BIPOC communities. Today, we are full of gratitude and admiration because despite persistent attacks, CRP members proved their resilience and unity and never backed down.
The story of these revolutionary students, staff, and community members of the College Readiness Program is documented in Jason Ferreira's From College Readiness to Ready for Revolution, which actually inspired the name of our conference, as well as today's theme, Moving in Solidarity, Building Movements. The Third World Liberation Front arose in 1968 at San Francisco State University by a coalition of Black, Asian, and Latinx students calling for campus reform. In 1969, a similar coalition of student activists came together at UC Berkeley to form another Third World Liberation Front, which our speaker today played a momentous role in as the leader of the Native American component. These coalitions, as well as other multi-ethnic collectives throughout the Bay Area college campuses, held various TWLF strikes, which made history as some of the nation's longest student strikes. In his article, Ferreira describes how CSM students connected to the Bay Area Third World Liberation Front through their own Third World activism efforts here at the College of San Mateo. CSM's College Readiness Program, which Brittany just mentioned, formed in 1955 as a recruitment and retention program for students of color, born in order to address significant inequities represented by a 90% dropout rate for students of color at the time. Thanks to community champions such as Aaron Manganiello, the CRP became increasingly radical as a space to foster critical thinking and liberatory activism-oriented ideas. Ferreira describes the CRP as having, quote, nurtured a culture of resistance that was contagious, end quote, and bridging the various marginalized student groups on campus in their calls for reform. They advocated for Third World autonomy in its various manifestations, including the formation of a Third World Liberation Division. This approach to fighting for a unified department for all marginalized students, rather than separate divisions for each ethnic group, reflected the powerful solidarity that the CRP students lived and breathed. Their efforts received forceful backlash from the College of San Mateo administration, including legal persecution and toleration of violence against the CRP community by conservative white students. Eventually, as a result of this unwillingness to cooperate and outright violence, the CRP came to a close. However, not all was lost, as the efforts of the CRP staff and students led to the establishment of an ethnic studies division at CSM the following year, and created a radical legacy of third world activism, which students such as myself and everyone here can look to as inspiration. As CSM president at the time, Robert Awiglebin, said following the TWLF protests, quote, "There is talk of revolution in our land today, and it is not idle talk," end quote. Sentiments which continue to ring true today. And this overreaching legacy is why we are extremely lucky and grateful to have Dr. LaNada War Jack, one of the pioneers of the historic Third World Liberation Front, joining us today as our keynote speaker.
Hello, thank you.
Dr. LaNada War Jack is an enrolled member of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes of the Fort Hall Indian Reservation in Idaho. She attended the University of California at Berkeley and majored in an independent major of Native American law and politics. While a student at UC Berkeley, LaNada participated as the Native American component of the Third World Strikes to establish the first ethnic studies program in the UC statewide university system. In 1969, LaNada and other students throughout California took over Alcatraz Island in a peaceful protest of the federal government's ill treatment of Native people and broken treaties with tribes. This facilitated certain subsequent government-funded policies for Indian tribes nationwide while recovering millions of acres of land back. President Nixon immediately signed an executive order to end the Termination Act. Pursuing enforcement of treaty obligations and Indian rights, LaNada was on the founding board and executive board of the Native American Rights Fund for nearly a decade and maintains a current relationship. LaNada has been an elected councilwoman for her tribes and served on many boards both locally and nationally. Dr. Warjack completed her graduate work at Idaho State University with a master's in public administration and a doctorate of arts degree in political science, Pocatello, Idaho in 1999. Dr. Warjack served as the executive director for the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes for 3 years and is presently the president of Indigenous Visions Network. She taught classes in Native American history at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. She also taught Native American law and politics at Boise State University in Boise, Idaho, as a distinguished professor. Dr. Warjack recently wrote a book titled Native Resistance: An Intergenerational Fight for Survival and Life, which is available on her website, www.drwarjack.com. And before we begin, I want to remind everyone that we are here until 4:15, and we hope you stay till the end. And Dr. Warjack, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Hello. Which were all killed, and so were reorganized under the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, and we're a federal corporation called Shoshone-Bannock Tribes. But who we are is we're members of one great nation, which is the Shoshonean Nation. And we all speak different languages, but they're all with the same language base called Uto-Aztecian. So our tribes under our nation are the Utes, the Paiutes, the Comanches, the Shoshones, the Mission Indians, the Comanches, and Hopis. But the way we identify ourselves is by our by our languages. So we're from Canada to Mexico. We're one of the largest nations, which was easier for us to be broken up and put under federal corporations. So our tribal governments are pretty much under the same patriarchy as, say, a city council, but that's under the state side, where we're under the federal side, which is different. We're under federal corporations. So not many of us left today within our nation, but we still acknowledge each other and try to retain our land, and we still work to stop the mining and the pollution of the water and contamination of the lands. And in that, I just wanted to say that I am very honored to be here today, and for all of you for having me here. And I'll talk a little bit about my role as a Native American 52 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 52 years ago, because we all change in time and we take on different roles, but it's continuously directed to support our original tribal systems, and also to support our people in the movements forward. I was sent out on government relocation from my tribes when I was 18 years old to the city of San Francisco. Wasn't alone. There were 60,000 other Native young people that were sent into the cities as a process of relocation to assimilate us into the mainstream of American society, as a way to get rid of our identity as a Native cultured people. As a matter of fact, there were laws that were established by Congress to take away our languages, our culture, and our religion in the 1880s, and then to seize and take all of the children and put them into government and Christian boarding homes. So we've been through the assimilation process as a result of these laws. And of course, a lot of us were wiped out, and many as a result of disease, because we lived such a pure way of life that we didn't have those diseases, and we weren't immune from the diseases when the Europeans and everyone came over. So we're about 1% of the entire population of the United States now. And say in Canada, maybe they have about 20%, and in Mexico and South America, they have about 60% of the Indigenous people left. So we've been through an incredible experience. And when I was sent out to the cities, they had 6 major cities in the United States that they were sending young people from 18 to 35. And I was 18, went to San Francisco. When I saw that the young people, I got here, I arrived here in 1965, and I was able to get into the University of California in 1968. So I found out that there was a program for the economically disadvantaged people under EOC, Economic Opportunity I'm going to say council, but it doesn't sound right. But it was the Economic Opportunity Program. And I was the first Native American student to get in. I was there a year before joining the Third World Strike in 1969 for ethnic studies. But while I was here, I was able to recruit other Native American students and also form an organization of Native American students. And then we formally joined the Third World Strike. So it was, to me, it was a very good way to be able to let the institution know that we were not invisible. We wanted to be visible with our own histories, recognizing our people, which was completely not there. It was we were invisible within the whole system. So we wanted to be acknowledged. And that was the reason why we joined the Third World Strike. And as the chairman of the group, then I worked with the Blacks, the Chicanos, and the Asians to establish ethnic studies. And I was really happy to become a part. I was the only female leader in the group. Everyone else had many leaders, 4 or 5. They had many people. And we had the support of the white students as well. And that was really the success of the Third World Strike, was being able to unite together under one umbrella and to have the support of the non-Indian people, the white students, the teachers, everyone that supported ethnic studies. So we started after San Francisco State in January. I believe they started in November of 68. We started in January of 69. But we negotiated first 2 weeks prior to San Francisco State getting their ethnic studies department. And I believe it helped them to be able to get ethnic studies, because once it was accepted at UC Berkeley, it went statewide. So we had ethnic studies within every department of the UC Berkeley system. And we were able to develop our own curriculum and try to find people to teach our classes. Like one of the classes we were able to get was a native language. We didn't have a lot of native speakers, but there were many Lakota speakers at that time. So we just had them teach the classes. So I took a year of Lakota language. And when I graduated, I declared English as my foreign language because I had a native language. And of course, they didn't like that. They wouldn't accept it. But I think that that's still the mark that we need to make once they declare English as the foreign language, because it is. So after that, we went and took Alcatraz Island as a native protest against the broken treaties, against the bad legislation that impacted our reservations and our communities, that hurt us. And I have a little video to present on the type of protests we went under. And of course, all our protests as Native people are nonviolent because of our cultural base, which practices nonviolence. And so could you show that short video I have? What you're witnessing is a sunrise ceremony on Alcatraz Island, a gathering of Native American tribes from across the country to honor a hidden piece of this island's history, a history that is more relevant today than ever before. My name is LaNada War Jack, a member of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes of Idaho. Alcatraz wasn't always a notorious federal prison or tourist attraction. Long before that, before European settlers even came to the United States, this island belonged to the Ohlone people. But in the mid-1800s, this sacred land was taken from the Ohlone during a time when the U.S. military seized control of the San Francisco Bay. The other thing you need to know about Alcatraz is that for 19 months, I lived here. On November 20th, 1969, I was one of the 89 students who sailed across the bay to reclaim Alcatraz for all Native people. We called ourselves Indians of all tribes, and we were there to take a stand, to demand an answer to why more than 500 treaties with the federal government promising to preserve Indian land, water, and human rights had been dishonored over and over again. For over 500 years, Native people have suffered through genocide and subsequent assimilation policies. These were policies that sought to stifle Native American culture by making our languages and ceremonies illegal. Policies that forced our parents and grandparents into government and Christian boarding schools as children so that they would forget their culture, and policies that divided our land. In fact, millions of acres were taken from us by congressional acts as resources like gold, gas, and oil were discovered on Native territories and reservations. Indians for all tribes occupied Alcatraz, turning it into a protest symbol for every Native person across the country who wanted the centuries of ill treatment by the federal government to end. We lived here without adequate food, shelter, water, electricity, or heat, much like our people on reservations and in Native communities. We painted political statements on the walls and told our stories to the local and international press so that our protests could not be ignored. It was the first time all Native people had united to have their voice heard. And though the occupation ended after 19 months, our stand was not in vain. In 1970, almost immediately after the Alcatraz occupation, President Nixon announced new legislation in an effort to improve the lives of Native people.
In a White House ceremony today, President Nixon signed a bill returning to the Indians some land seized in 1906, including Blue Lake, which is sacred to the Taos Pueblos.
Over the next 5 years, the government transferred millions of acres of ancestral lands back to Native people and passed more than 50 legislative proposals supporting tribal sovereignty. The impact of Alcatraz was like a rock hitting the bay, sending 1,000 ripples across the water as nearly 1,000 events in support of Native Americans happened as the result of our action. Despite that,
The treaties and laws created to protect Native sovereignty continue to be ignored. For the past 47 years, we have fought for our land, life, and water, engaging in the legal and administrative process to no avail. So here I stand again at the Osheti-Sakoan camp in Standing Rock, North Dakota, fighting the same fight for our inherent rights. The land that surrounds you is the ancestral land of the Mandan and Standing Rock Sioux Nation, which over time has been desecrated by corporations in search of gold, gas, and oil. Once again, the federal government has not honored the laws and treaties they swore to uphold. In spite of the harsh conditions, thousands of people camped here to stop oil companies from building the Dakota Access Pipeline without our consent.
But why I came here was because I knew that our people needed our help, and I knew that they needed more of us out there. Our people are strong. Our people will do whatever it takes to protect everybody, to protect our water, to protect our future, our children, everything. That's what they don't get.
To many of us, the occupation of Standing Rock felt like history repeating itself. It was an example of Alcatraz's legacy, a resistance that ignited a spirit that brought us all together, united in the fight to protect water and life. And though the government shut down the Standing Rock camp in February 2017, our fight did not stop after Alcatraz, and it won't be stopped now.
Well, that's just a short introduction of the Alcatraz portion, and hopefully we can get together a documentary for the Third World Strike and initiating ethnic studies, which is an important part. However, most of the well, at least for the Native American studies, we still have trouble trying to get the information out and the truth being told. And now they call it critical race theory, the history of our country and the genocide that was directed at us so that they can take and steal the land. And that's pretty much the basis of why I got involved and became active, because I know my history, and as a older person now, I'm 77, and I have a different kind of a role. As young people, when we were young people, we could be very active and we could do things, and we just need to be able to have a reason. It was a reason for me because I knew that our identity and our culture was disappearing. And I had a role in trying to make sure that we continued so that our lives could be better and be more improved on the reservations and in the urban communities. there's a prophecy with Alcatraz that I wanted to talk about. And when we were on the island, I was visited by the Hopis, and the Hopis told me that they had to come and see it for themselves because they knew about the prophecy. And what it was a tree that was cut off at the base in the rock writings. And from the base, fed by the ancient roots, these sprouts were growing from the base. And then they looked at the outline around the tree, and it was the same outline as in the Bay Area. So then they knew that that's what that prophecy meant, was that it was the young people that were coming back to complete the tree, to continue to grow, and to bring back our ancient culture and our languages and our practices. So that's, although we, acknowledge Alcatraz as original Ohlone land, we also know that the prophecy is meant that we need to continue to grow and to build and to develop. And it's with all people. It's not just for natives, but we need to encourage and keep our spirits all growing and becoming one. So I wrote a book to try to explain what had happened to us and why we took Alcatraz and why we are still continuing to fight and resist, because you need to know your history well, and you need to know what is around you, because it took me a while before I realized that the reason why we couldn't develop in the way that we wanted to is because of the oppressive hierarchy that we were living under, and that was called the patriarchy. As opposed, and then we're speaking in the English language, as opposed to the matriarchy, which is a circle of life and the traditional governments that we lived under. Okay, in this, the circle of life right here represents the matriarchy. And then this is the process we had to go through to get into the patriarchy. The patriarchy is man-made laws. The matriarchy is the natural laws of the universe. So we were denied our cultural ways because of the natural laws that we lived through and under or with. We became a part of the natural environmental ecosystem where we were living. And the patriarchy is all man-made laws. Could I see the next chart? And this is just kind of, it's not perfect or anything. I just pulled this together to show the patriarchy and how this is, but it's all man-made, where on the very bottom would be the people, and then how it progresses on up to the city governments, and then the district representatives, and on to the state senate and Congress, and then the representatives on the congressional level, and all the laws that are made. And then it shows the different divisions of the cabinets, the military and the treasury. And within the cabinets on this side, it's so much more extended. But this is just a brief little chart to show where we have, I think, 15 departments within this system here, which is a Treasury, Agricultural, Defense, and on, as you could read, in Interior is one of those cabinets. So I have right here the Secretary of Interior, and fortunately we were able to get a Native person appointed as the Secretary of Interior, and they're over all of these departments, which would be the Bureau of Land Management, Reclamation, and all these departments, including the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we're under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, under this whole management system on the federal side. So we don't have a chance to vote for our people and go through this process where we could have laws made or be a part of that process. But this process here makes laws over us on the federal side, because under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, then we're set up, we have another setup where we have our tribal governments. I think there's 565 Indian Reorganization Act tribal governments, and we also have separate forms of government called our self-determination tribal government systems. But here we are on the very bottom of this as a tribal people, having to go through our tribal councils. And we can elect our tribal councils, but that's as far as it goes. We don't have any voice, that goes clear to the hierarchy that is over us. So under this patriarchy, we're just left completely without any voice. And to this day, we still don't have civil liberties. So our form of tribal government, like I said, is like any city municipality, where we operate just like the non-Indians operate, except that we don't have this process where we can go on up to have our voice represented in things that would happen. So under this colonized area here, under the patriarchy, everything is done in the favor and the interests of this entire system. And there is nothing for us. And could you go back to the other matriarch right here? So right here in the matriarchy, the circle of life, this is the one that needs to be developed. I don't have this one developed, but what we need to move to is acknowledging the natural laws. Western society and Western ideology is not connected to the earth, and that's why it's so possible for them to mine and pollute and gather all the riches of the earth and just capitalize on money and all our resources. So right here under our matriarchy, since they put us under the Indian Reorganization Act in 1934, then we're set up right here on the bottom of the patriarchy. And so we need to make our move to get back to who we were. And hopefully once we start that process, then everyone else can learn as well, because Indigenous culture is worldwide. It's just that it's been changed in different directions throughout time. And if it's negative, then somebody got in there and changed it. because it's all positive. This is a within your natural environment. And we picked plants and animals as our symbols and medicines, so that we, because the plants that supply other plants with, the kind of nutrients that they need to produce. And it's been a continuous struggle to try to get recognition of our natural life and our natural laws again. And I've discussed it to a point in terms of our getting back to our natural ways of life. And we just have to change our bureaucracy within the Indian Reorganization Act and the system they set us up on, and at least try to work with our people to try to get back, because we went through such a horrible time that it caused a cycle of dysfunction where many of our people, they were children, where they were physically abused, mentally, sexually, and it created this whole cycle of dysfunction coupled with extreme poverty. And then it turned to an underground culture of alcohol and drugs. So that's really bad. It's not a good way to live. And so we're trying to break out of that. And I guess that would be the goal. And what I'm trying to work for is developing this matriarchy and moving from the hierarchy, which is what our tribal governments are now established as a hierarchy. And hopefully, if we can return back to our values and establish our matriarchy again, then we will heal ourselves. But until then, we're still going through that extreme dysfunction, which is difficult. So the matriarchy isn't all male. The matriarchy represents the balance of life, the male and the female. They have equal, they're co-partners with co-energies that do this. But over here under the patriarchy, this is male dominated. And it's all to control the riches and the wealth, and the laws are there to protect that group of people. And the people on the bottom are going through the same thing we are within our tribal governments, but on a larger scale. And it's easier to see for me when I could see how tribal governments operate, and I've studied tribal governments from the very bottom and on the way to, being on the tribal council. And I can see how difficult it is as a tribal council person to try to get positive things done, because it's controlled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and everything that comes out of the tribal council has to be agreed upon by the Bureau of Indian Affairs and on to the Secretary of Interior. And I think the self-governance tribes have eliminated that, but it's not everybody yet. But in that process of elimination, you're still losing the agreements under the treaties that were established for all the various tribes that were broken. So the treaties are still, not representative of the way that we wanted to live, but it did establish areas of land. And the reason why we went through such poverty was because when we were put on the reservations, forcibly removed to those reservations, then people went hungry because we had territories that we traveled through to get our food. We knew when the berries were going to be ripe or when our camas root was going to be ready to be taken for food. We knew when the elk and the deer was ready to be taken for food. And, you know, on the plains, the jackrabbit, the rabbits, you know, we had a system established where we would travel throughout our territories at the best time to gather our plants and our animals and our foods. So when we were enclosed in a prison mentality type reservation, we had to stay there. And that's what caused all the poverty and why we didn't have sufficient help, and we still don't have sufficient help, you know, because now we're living in the money system. But if we could somehow work to establish ourselves, to work with the land again, and to become the people that we once were, it would be awesome. It's so that's kind of my ongoing job that I do for myself, is try to develop something that would be workable among IRA tribes. And we're going to need a lot of help. We're going to need help from the federal government themselves to acknowledge us as traditional organizations rather than under the federal law that puts us in this patriarchy. And we're still living with that mentality of being imprisoned. Like we have it, you know, many of our people think because our tribal constitution stipulates that we have to be born as a resident of the reservation, which means physically living on that reservation, in order to be a member, voting member of the tribes, in order to participate in the economic resources and to have a voice within the tribe. So it doesn't work because, you know, we don't have sufficient housing on the reservation to provide for everybody. And some tribes have taken it upon themselves to start disenrollment so that the tribal members, there won't be so many tribal members. And, you know, of course, that's not the right direction to go, but, you know, what they need to do is to get more to help their people instead of trying to disenroll and cutting the membership down because you need to get your family or your people involved in that. And that's just part of that dysfunction that we've been going through as a result of the assimilative practices into Western society, and as a result of the boarding schools and the Christian boarding schools that have hurt us, because then it's now generational. We go through the various generations of people on top of each other who don't know the culture anymore and don't practice it. And that's how everyone turns to alcohol and drugs. So we could see over there what's happening with Western society with alcohol and drugs. You know, it's a part of their lives, but it's not an accepted way of life as a cultured person. So as young people, you know, I just want to stress that, yes, you are the ones to take the action, but you need to know what you're doing. You need to understand and know everything about your society and how it's arranged and what you can do to change that and what you could do to support us as well, because all the commonality we have with everybody is the oppressive forces that we're all living under now, you know, which is in every social institution within the United States, the practice of discrimination and racism. It's on the books, it's not allowed, but it happens, and it's been happening. And it's something that, you know, needs to stop, but we need to find ways to change the way people think. And you know, I think that the way that I mean, I know what I'm gonna do, but you know, it won't be the same for everybody, because it's just like that living ecosystem in our environment. Everyone is different. You know, like they're different plants and animals and symbols, but they could all be very beneficial, because that's what it takes in order to continue the circle of life, is to help one another in that whole circle. So even though there are many different kinds of people and different races, you know, everyone has a contribution, has something that they can offer that's really good, that would help, you know, the whole circle of life function again. And of course, our prayers, we maintain our spirituality that we've had for thousands of years prior to Christianity, when it was forced upon us, and it kept us going and living in a very clean and good way for thousands of years. So, you know, we want to take that step forward, which is back to our culture. And it may be seen as going back, but it's actually going forward, because it's been taken away from us. And we need to get back to who we were. And it's happening. It's happening here on the reservations, you know, among a certain amount of people, and then it grows. So that's what we want to do, is to recreate ourselves back to who we were, and to grow from there, and to clear a path of how to change and be important for everything that has to take place. So I guess I didn't ask if we're going to have a question and answer period, but can someone give me some direction here?
Hi, Dr. Warjack. Yes, it is 4:10, so we don't have too much time left, but we can definitely open it up to questions for the last few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
There that would like to ask Warjack, Dr. Warjack, any questions? There's been a lot of important information, so many movements that you've been part of, and so many different aspects of the work that you're doing. I love the political side that you also educated us on. Yeah, I know there's a lot of love and appreciation in the chat as well. There is actually someone, Margarita, who was also part of the time here at CSM with the College Readiness Program in 1968. Margarita, do you by any chance have any questions or anything you'd like to share? If you'd like to unmute, you can click the raise hand function on the bottom center of the screen, and then Roger can give you permission to unmute if you'd like.
Hi, Dr. Warjack, thank you so much. I've enjoyed listening to you so much. So informative. Right now I'm really involved. It's driving me crazy, but I'm fighting for Leonard Peltier's freedom, because was it really proven that, you know, and they never tried to show us in. I don't know how to say this. I'm all nervous, but anyway, I have been seriously fighting for Native Americans more than anything else. That and gun control. And I just appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to be on Alcatraz with you when you were there.
Hey, it was
I
fun.
like you. You know, we look alike, so I could have passed it. But anyway, my dad was very strict back then.
Yeah,
It's a different story. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been really an incredible life, and getting around to everywhere and seeing everything that's happening within the world. And, you know, we just have to keep up our prayers for peace. And that's a very strong way of doing things if you can't do anything else. Because I'm older in life now. I can still think and I get around, but I think we need to continue to move forward and do things that will help other people, and understanding each other, knowing that there are so many different kinds of people. Not everyone is this way or that, you know, one way or the other, but, you know, we need to acknowledge all people and help them and do what we can. And that's what I've been doing my whole life.
And what an inspiring life you have led. Thank you so much, Dr. Warjack. I just wanted to ask you one question. It's kind of general, but do you have any like advice or next steps for people such as Margarita and the other attendees here today for how they can get involved in supporting Native Americans, and just, as you said, like, you know, the common fight against these systems of oppression that affect us all?
I think the main thing is, you know, you can't control anybody. You can only control yourself. So in that control of yourself, you just need to research, know your history, know what's happening in the country, be ready to speak if necessary, and just always promote peace and understanding the best way you can. I wrote a book. It's not complete. I'm working on amending that, and probably have to get another producer or book publisher, but I may do audio next, but I'm still moving forward because there's just so much information and things that could be done. And young people have the energy for that, but at least now I'm to a point where I've accumulated a lot of experiences and more wise now than I was at the time. And, you know, I just try to work with young people because they're the new generation. They're the generation that has all the intelligence. Their senses are working. They can get around, they can learn. I mean, young people have so many things in their advantage that they could do and use to then benefit not only themselves, but everyone else. And you have to start with yourself first, because you can't help anybody unless you can get yourself together. And that's why it's so different, you know, the different stages and changes of your life and your roles and things that happen, you know, are very different. So I'm still going, I'm still writing, I'm still working on my audio, I'm revising, I'm doing presentations. I do as much as I can for the life that I have left. And I'm probably the only one out of a lot of people. And that's, you know, as a leader, as a person who's in the front, you need to take care of your life. You can't go off and party and drink and take drugs, because that's going to impact you and you're not going to have a long life to live. So if you have some information or something to share, you got to take care of your life as well, so that you can continue on into your older ages and take that wisdom and continue to do the best that you can to promote peace and happiness. That's what I'm doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warjack, for joining us today and for sharing with us the work you've done and continue doing. We've unfortunately reached the end of our session today, but we appreciate you again for taking the time to share with us how we can get involved in the fight for Indigenous rights. And we now know the importance of, educating ourselves and advocating for ourselves and our communities. Do you have any closing words before we close off?
No, I think you said it yourself. It's, to promote yourself and your education, do your research, know as much as you can, and become involved with other people to support them and help them. And, the older people, they've already pretty well set in their ways. So I just focus on younger people because they still have a chance. There's a lot of people that have already formed their mind on, closed it, colonized it, whatever. But the young people have a chance, and that's what we need to share and promote with each other and help each other. And along with that comes prayer. That's what kept me alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warjack. Again, we appreciate and admire you. This was a very powerful presentation. And to everyone watching, also joining us either in person or virtually, thank you so much for taking the time to join our day 3 of Rise and Revolution. Don't forget to join us for the rest of the week. Tomorrow's topic will be Abolition Now, and our speakers include Jasmine Della Fosse and Dr. Angela Davis. So we hope to see you there, and thank you so much again, everyone, and to Dr. Warjack.
Thank you.